time to fire up the studio and put another plugin to the test. Today I will be featuring Perfect Plate XL from Denise Audio. Will it fly or die? Find out next in Plug In, Plug Out. Hey there, I'm Dan the Lonely Rocker. Welcome to the first episode of Plug In, Plug Out. This is a new series where I'm going to be focusing on my plugin reviews. For those of you who follow my channel know that I typically review my plugins in the I Don't Have a Band series. That tends to be a positive series where I only feature things that I would use myself and plus tips and tricks and things like that. But one of the constructive bits of feedback that I got about my plugin reviews is that the reviews themselves need to be a little bit more constructive. So I decided to pull these reviews out of that series and create a new series called Plug In, Plug Out, where I'm going to be maybe a little more open and honest about the different features that I like and don't like, and ultimately decide if I'm going to keep the plugin or I'm going to toss it out. These are not going to be sponsored reviews. The opinions are going to be my own, and who am I? I'm just some guy with a camera. It's just whether or not I would choose to keep it or not. The first candidate in Plug In, Plug Out is from a company that I have featured on this channel before, and that's Denise Audio. Today we're going to be taking a look at Perfect Plate XL, which is a plate reverb plugin. They do have the Perfect Plate version of the plugin, and XL is the extended version. I'm going to be focusing on the extended version of the plugin. So let's get started and take a look at Perfect Plate from Denise Audio. So Perfect Plate XL is based on a plate reverb. So what is a plate reverb? Well, if you're new to plugins and reverbs and things like that, I mean, digital reverbs that exist in plugin form are based on two concepts, something that exists in the real world and something that doesn't. Real world examples are like a cathedral or a hall. Imagine you're standing in an open, empty warehouse. You're standing in one corner of the room and the microphone is at the other end or in the middle of the room. You know, you get different lengths of echo and reverberation. That's something that you can create in the real world. And then there's different reverbs that sort of create imaginary reverbs through digital technology. So a plate reverb is based on an actual physical steel plate. It's generally under tension in a frame, and then the sound is thrown up against that steel plate, which, you know, just imagine you hit a steel door with a hammer and that sort of reverberation you get. Well, they do that with the source sound, and that's blended back in with the original source. There's different mechanisms on a plate reverb where you can, you know, change the tension, and there's a dampening on it, so you can change the length of the reverb and things like that, but it's a mechanical process. So with Perfect Plate XL, the sound of the reverbs are based on a plate reverb, but they've introduced mechanisms and features in the plugin that just don't exist in the real world, and makes the prospect of this plate reverb really, really interesting. So let's take a look at some of the features of the plugin. Okay, let's take a look at the plugin here. I did spend a little bit of time with it ahead, so I'm not coming in completely cold. I'm not quite ready to give you a tutorial on the plugin just yet, but certainly I've spent enough time with it that I have a good understanding of how it works. And I want to take you through some of the main features of the plugin. The thing that struck me right away, and in reviewing God Mode, is the built-in EQ. Right away, I can see how that's going to work in terms of a reverb. I'll get to that in a second. And the fact that there are drive settings in here as well, so you can add some tape saturation and saturation effects to the reverb, which was a really great feature in God Mode. So excited to look at it here in Perfect Plate XL. All right, so in the main window, some of the basic settings, there's three different types of reverbs here. You can choose a dark, something more natural, or bright. And here you choose between the different dampening filter speeds. So I've got a guitar part here. Let's just run that dry. And I'll just turn on the plugin in default mode right now. So what I really love about the built-in EQ is that as you can shape the reverb where you really want it to be pronounced. So if you don't want the reverb be triggering too much in the lower frequencies, you can just roll them out. You can pick out specific frequencies that you really want to activate that reverb, and that's really, really a cool feature. one thing I'll say, and as anyone knows, too much reverb in a mix can really wash out your mix. So think how you EQ your tracks to find placements for different frequencies. You can actually do that with your reverb built into the plugin. So that actually is really, really cool. Some other settings here, you've got input setting and output setting, so you can control the signal coming into the plugin, and then the output setting, obviously standard mix, so dry, wet mix. The high pass and low pass filters also was in the God Mode plugin, so you can roll off the low end, roll off the top end a little bit. Again, just finding ways to carve that reverb to really find a place for it, which is really, really great. Delay, I assume that's your pre-delay, the length of your tail, and the width of that reverb. So let's just play with some of these settings. So the quality setting here, that's your Q, so you can tighten the Q on any of the frequencies that you select. So here's without. It's a beautiful reverb. Really nice. All right, let's dive into some of the other features here. So drive, let's take a listen to it a little bit. Some makeup gain here as well. Is that just the reverb? Yeah. Nice. So here you can control a few different types of saturation. You've got tape, warp, buzz, for example, and then you have a master sort of mix here, how much saturation you want to bring into the reverb. Rotate here. So here's a bunch of different ways that you can manipulate the reverb. Again, now think about a standard plate reverb. This is where digital technology comes in. We can take something that exists in the physical world, and now we can manipulate it digitally by adding different effects, vibrato, tremolo, things like that. So let's just take a quick listen. It's really just another a number of parameters here that you can customize your reverb, create some movement and shape in that reverb. That's really cool. Detune as well, some wow and shake. Let's take a listen to that. Go back and mix this down a little bit. Really, really nice. Ducker. Actually, I want to take a listen to the Ducker utilizing the drums. Let's isolate those. One sec. So what the Ducker does is you can have the reverb duck the source signal. So for example, those transients aren't watered down by the reverb. Those transients cut through, and then the reverb follows afterwards. That's really a great way to sort of minimize some of the wishy-washy muddiness that a reverb can bring into a track. So let's take a listen here. Okay, so here the Ducker is off. When I turn it on, you can notice that those transients are punching through, and then the reverb tails afterwards. and using parameters similar to what you'd find in a compressor, you know, a threshold and attack. So how fast the ducker reacts at what level, at what threshold that it kicks in. So if you're familiar with using a compressor, very, very similar settings here to get that ducker working for you. Again, great way to clean up your reverb to make sure that the source signal cuts through, and then blend in your reverb really nicely. So there's a lot of features in this plugin, really compact design. And by the way, one thing that I was going to be a little bit critical of, and they seem to have rectified that, is the ability to resize the plugin. I couldn't resize the last plugin, but obviously they realized it was time to do that. So for the sight challenge people like myself, you can scale the plugin so it's really easy to see on any monitor. And for a plate reverb, which is typically a simple reverb to place, they've created a lot of really interesting features to help you really customize, and not only customize, but to carve out that reverb so it sits nicely in your mix. The first example I want to share with you is what I did on the drums. If you look at the mix setting and just about 10% in there, the main thing that I did focus on for this particular setting was I pulled down the reverb around where the kick drum is, and focus more on the snare drum and a little bit of the top end. Let's take a listen. For the rhythm guitar, the clean guitar, again, if you look at the EQ curve here, I rolled off everything sort of mid-range, low end, just rolled it off. I just wanted to bring a bit of shine and twinkle to the guitar. Again, about 15% in the mix. Quite a long tail on there as well, though, because I wanted to have a nice rich reverb, but then just blend it back. I don't want to have too much in there. In the rotate section, I did bring in some vibrato. I wanted to play with some movement in the reverb just to create a nice little shimmer and character in the reverb for the guitar. And also in the drive, I actually brought in a bit of a drive as well, just to dirty it up just a little bit. Let's take a listen. For the strings, I actually did something interesting. This is where I really took advantage of the tremolo effects, is that I've taken just a basic string pattern, and then I added some tremolo effects to give a real nice pulsing, almost feels like violins or something like that, which I wanted to create the nice little movement. So I started actually with the, I believe the LFO plate setting, and then I played around with the shapes a little bit, and just to create that real quick little pulsing. There's the time and feel setting here that allowed me to adjust the timing of that pulsing. Let's take a listen. In the guitar solo, something actually I want to touch on that I forgot to touch on in the features section is the resonator section. This is actually a really, really cool feature, is you can actually tune the resonant frequencies coming off of that plate, which is really interesting. So if you got a little bit of theory, you can dial into tuning the resonant frequencies coming off the plate. You have 3 different frequency options here. So the chord progression in the song, you've got D major, E minor, G major. So I tuned the frequencies to Ds and Es and then mixed them in, which is a really, really cool to be able to tune those resonant frequencies to mix and blend in nicely with the original source sound. Let's take a listen how the guitar solo turned out. lastly, let's take a listen to the whole mix with Perfect Plate XL throughout the whole mix. We've got it on, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4 different tracks. So I'll give you a little sample of the mix without any reverb on any of the tracks, and then I'll bring them all in. And just you can hear how it impacts the mix as a whole. And I think that ability to tune your reverb, be able to hone in on what frequencies you want to respond, and place that better so all of them work well together. Take a listen to this. Well, the verdict is in. Am I going to keep Perfect Plate XL or is it going to hit the trash heap? Well, Denise Audio has not disappointed me. They make some really great plugins. I think a sign of a really good plugin developer is a company that's built a great foundation, and then they can build their products off of that foundation. The built-in EQ and saturation in this plugin is absolutely amazing. When I use God mode, and again, having that built-in EQ and the ability to sculpt the effect is a really, really handy feature. I mean, I was thinking about how I would achieve this without the built-in EQ. You could bus your track to a bus with a reverb, throw an EQ on there and a saturation, but then if you'd want different curves for different tracks, you'd have to keep adding buses. So the beauty that it's built in, it's light on the CPU. You can use it liberally around your projects. You can carve out some really custom reverbs and get them working together, because overusing reverb can cause a lot of mud in your tracks. And as an example with the drums, where I was able to sort of move the reverb off the kick drum and just sort of focus on the snare and the cymbals on the top end, really allowed me to sculpt that reverb for the specific track, and then tuck in all the other reverbs around, and the full effect was just absolutely beautiful. So 100% Perfect Plate XL is a winner. Now, whether or not it's for you or not, you have to decide kind of where you are in your plugin purchases. At about $90 odd US, that's about $125 in my Canadian bucks. It's certainly not the cheapest plugin out there, and there are reverbs that offer different styles of reverb in one plugin, but I'd argue none of them will be as developed as this particular plugin. So you just need to decide where you're at with your plugins, but it's definitely worth a look. I do recommend you try before you buy. You can head over to Denise's website. I'll put a link in the description. Make sure to check them out. And if you do check it out, just drop me a note in the comments. Well, if you like this video, nothing says thank you more than hitting that subscribe button. It doesn't cost you anything, and it encourages me to make more content. Certainly you can hit the like button and ring that notification bell so you can stay up to date with everything that I'm doing. If you really want to support this channel, I am on Patreon. Links to everything that I discussed, well, I put them in the description below. And most importantly, I hope I'll see you again in another video.